Hello and welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. So people are up in arms that Joe Biden pardoned his son, a full and unconditional pardon. Is Joe Biden's middle name really Robinette? That can't be. This is totally unsurprising, and I'll tell you why. People they were surprised that Joe Biden said the entire time, "No, I'm not going to pardon him." I'm sure he thought that he was going to be president again, and when that all fell apart, he probably thought that Hunter's convictions would be overturned or something. The winds would blow in his favor somehow. But I will tell you what, if you look at this family dynamic, Hunter Biden is like the poster child, and I've talked about this so many times, for codependency. He develops codependency in other people. He grooms other people in his life to be codependent on his behalf. And his dad and his stepmom, they are probably the most codependent people who have ever been in the White House. So, and it's like, here's a guy who's running around completely naked, crack pipe dangling out of his mouth, impregnating strippers, the list of things that he has done that are now in the public arena that were not Russian disinformation. Those things, it's stunning to think that a child of a president has put themselves in such an unsavory light, but he did over and over and over again. I mean, you know that this guy he was manufactured by demons. He doesn't just have a few skeletons in his closet. He's got an entire warehouse. And he lives with them, probably smoked crack with them when he was using. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's not and that he's been sober for 5 years like his dad claims. But, here's a person who has preyed upon his family's name. He has used every means necessary to enrich himself without really developing any skill. I mean, he got kicked out of the Navy for testing positive for cocaine. We all know the things that Hunter Biden did. He lied on a federal gun application. He didn't pay millions of dollars in taxes. And some of the people who are coming out defending Joe Biden saying, well, his son was unfairly targeted by the Department of Justice that is run by a Joe Biden ally who was put into the Department of Justice as the Attorney General because he was screwed out of a Supreme Court seat. Merrick Garland. You remember he was nominated to be on the Supreme Court in 2016. And when President Trump was elected, that vaporized, and he would have been a sure thing in any other political environment. But Mitch McConnell obviously bet on Trump, stalled his nomination, and he's not on the Supreme Court. He's in charge of the Justice Department. He owes that to Joe Biden, who salvaged Merrick Garland's legacy. And so, of course, there are people who have gone to prison for decades for, lying on federal forms and having guns when they shouldn't and, cheating the government out of millions of dollars in taxes. Bill and Dana the other day on America's Newsroom interviewed a guy who spent 10 months in prison for the exact same crime. So, yes, Hunter Biden was a garden variety defendant. And when the federal government puts a case against you, they have a very phenomenally high conviction rate. And he was going to get convicted. The plea deal fell apart. The problem that people have is Joe Biden the entire time said, no, I'm not going to pardon him. No, I'm not going to pardon him. Why wouldn't he? His legacy is in shambles. The only thing people are going to remember about Joe Biden are his embarrassing, it's like immoral debate performance, immoral because his handlers actually let him get on the debate stage in the condition that he was in, which I think, is probably just symptomatic of sundowner syndrome. And he's probably like that every single night and can't put a cohesive sentence together. Unfortunately, he did it at the worst possible moment of his presidency when he was trying to get reelected. He imploded. So that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember, for their own look back in their personal lives, they're going to remember not being able to afford things. They're going to remember rent and gas and eggs being very, very expensive. They're going to remember not being able to travel. They're going to remember having to take out a lot more money than they thought they would on student loans. And then they're going to remember the feeling of thinking those loans were going to be forgiven, and then being told that no, they actually had to pay the loans probably at a higher rate.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
That's what Joe Biden's legacy is. And then add on top of that, he was pushed out of the way by a bunch of bullies in the Democrat Party who are really running things, who lost confidence in him, even though the codependent people around him still propped him up. And still, they wanted the power so badly. They made him believe that he was 1992 Joe Biden, 1990 or 1988 Joe Biden, and that he was just as capable of a second term because he had earned it. He was a 50-year public servant, and he had done so much good for this country. So, yeah, he forgets things once in a while. Yeah, he trips going upstairs. Yeah, he shakes hands with dead people. He still deserved to be president. That's what they wanted because they wanted the trappings of the presidency for themselves. And, when you have Jill Biden and Hunter Biden, who were clearly propping him up, then when everything fell apart, everything was also taken from them. That's why Kamala Harris was the nominee, because Joe Biden turned his back on the party establishment who had turned their backs on him. And he said, you know what? You guys don't like her. I'm going to select her because if she becomes president, she owes me. This is the only way I'm going to secure my legacy is if she becomes president and she is successful, it will be a continuation of my presidency. It will be, the phantom second term that I deserved but never had. And when he lost his chance, when he imploded on the debate stage, when he lost his chance to run for the second term, and he was forced to resign the presidency, essentially. I mean, he's still president, which is shocking. And then when she lost every battleground state and lost, stalwart factions in the Democrat Party by double digits, it was such a massive crumbling of someone that he handpicked to be his vice president. She was never up for that job. She was never up for the presidency. People are still hurting. They think about their personal finances. They think about immigration. They think about having to compete with jobs against people who are here illegally, working for a lot less money, working for cash, not paying taxes, blah, blah, blah. That's why she lost. There were a number of reasons that he lost, but she lost. But she also lost his legacy. She also lost his second term. So he, having been robbed of all of that, had nothing to lose. And also, if people look back, and just think of it from his perspective, if people look back and if the one thing they think about is, here's the guy who pardoned his crack-addled son, who enriched himself. Luckily for him, the statute of limitations ran out, so they couldn't indict him for any of the Burisma shenanigans. He's the one who, so publicly, so embarrassingly displayed who he really was, and his dad pardoned him. When, my uncle went to jail, my son went to jail, but Hunter Biden, because he's a Biden, he gets off scot-free because his dad is compromised. Joe Biden would rather be remembered as a family guy who maybe turned his back on some of his promises, but never turned his back on his son. That's how he wants to be remembered, because if he's remembered for that and not being the frail old man with dementia who wandered into the rainforest, the guy who had a second term in his grasp and fumbled the ball, that's how he does not want to be remembered. He doesn't want to be remembered as being frail and weak and old and the cause of so many problems. He does not mind being remembered as the guy who gave his only living son a pardon, because that's all he has left in this world, because everyone else and everything else has abandoned him. So that's why he did it. And he doesn't care. And will this encourage President Trump and every other president? Does it give them cover to pardon their own family members? You bet your sweet ass it does. And that is the precedent that this president set. And, Democrats, they may defend him now, but it will bite them and their bitter keisters soon enough. This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app. Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World.